Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles. My ex-wife, she was a special kind of lady. The kind with an almost unbelievable type of crazy you only see in movies. She cheated one too many times, had me arrested on false charges, and kicked me out of our home. It was time to interventions mode. Warning, my ex-wife was a special kind of lady. That crazy wasn't just for show. There was a matching crazy, sexy time drive with it too. I had caught her cheating multiple times over the few years we were married, as well as indulging in some pretty hard forbidden candies, if you catch my drift. While I traveled for work, she stayed at home, watching her 2 kids from a previous marriage and our child. I chose to believe the lies too many times foolishly. Mostly because her older 2 were like my own. Their father had passed from cancer when they were still young. Also, because she had my child, and I didn't want her growing up in a broken home like I did. An opportunity presented itself for a fresh start with a relocation far away from the rat hole she grew up in, with all her connections and bad habits of her past. We agreed to move the family there, taking a nice promotion and giving her a chance to get in a new environment and work towards change. Fast forward a year, and much is still the same. She had taken up redoing furniture to try and sell it instead of getting a real job. This meant spending a lot of time making runs to a local store that resold the donated innards of houses being remodeled. There she met, let's call him Javier. She even introduced me to him as the helpful associate who always helped her load up the heaviest stuff she bought into her truck. Needless to say, my slimy sense was tingling. Every time she found someone new, I had this gut feeling she was going to eventually cheat on me with him. She was in her mid-30s and afraid to get old and undesirable, so she would pick out guys about 10 years younger to still feel attractive. Javier fit the bill and oddly looked similar to her deceased husband. Roll forward another 3 months, and the arguing was getting too much for me. She started insinuating that she would lie to CPS, claiming I was actually doing things to her kids so I would never see my daughter again. Or she would purposefully inflict harm on herself and threaten to say it was me. By this time, I was smart enough to start secretly video recording this stuff with my phone so I could avoid major issues down the road. About a week later, we had a massive fight just before Thanksgiving, one of my favorite holidays. We were all alone in terms of family, except for each other. She started the fight as a way to spend the holiday with Javier's family, unbeknownst to me. I wasn't aware of anything happening on that front yet. Her oldest kids were used to these crazy acts by now, and she didn't fear them telling me. My daughter was only 2 at the time. A couple of days later, after spending a lonesome Thanksgiving with my hungry man turkey dinner, I found out what really happened. The fight was massive, and I was done. She knew she had gone too far, and I was filing for divorce on Monday. It was Saturday. She managed to take one of my texts, the one I sent after she pulled over on a busy road with her youngest to kick me out and walked 4 miles home. She convinced law enforcement to arrest me to get me out of the house for the night. Our city had 24/7 judges, and I was out by noon on Sunday on $100 bail since it was a minor charge. She thought I was gone until Monday at minimum. I didn't call home. I just took an Uber. When I showed up, lo and behold, Javier had come to spend the night. At this point, it was laughable, and I knew what she was capable of. So I video recorded before even entering the house. He left, and then I left as the kids were at school the coming Monday. On Monday, I filed for divorce. On Tuesday, I appeared in court for my initial hearing for the arrest over the weekend. She requested a temporary restraining order on me at the hearing, and the courts granted it until the real trial. I was forced out of my home and also forced to keep paying all the bills while the divorce went on. Not for food, though. This was my lawyer's advice. The court gave me 6 hours on Wednesday to get as much of my stuff out of the house as I could. I was leaving that same day for a multi-week out-of-town job, so I couldn't take much. Anything left behind, I was at risk of never getting again. Now, I definitely needed work clothes and some street clothes, but I could maybe only take 2 to 3 suitcases of things at best. Cue the petty revenge. Over the 4 years we dated and being married, we had a strange hobby. We accumulated a collection of toys worth somewhere in the ballpark of $3,000 to $4,000, most of which was kept in a big trunk that looked like a magician's case. Well, that stuff was mine as much as it was hers. I bought it all for her, and she loved it with or without others' involvement. She kept her favorites hidden in different places, like her closet or inside a shoe rack. I packed what I really wanted in about an hour and a half and spent the next 2 hours searching for all her hidden favorites. I cleaned up place out of anything explicit and tossed it all in the large truck. I left with time to spare in the bed of my truck, loaded with my work gear, some suitcases, and her special truck. I drove about 5 hours to get to the hotel for the job I was going on, and after checking in, I saw a big green dumpster in the back corner. I pulled my truck around, backed up, and hoisted the 80-pound-plus monster into the bin and smiled. It wasn't a lot, but it felt really good to have gotten at least one leg up on her. I knew she would be furious to not have anything to help her de-stress from her life about to be falling apart. A side note, the case was eventually dropped against me when she wrote a letter to the district attorney stating I was fine, and she wasn't afraid of me. That's the only way they'd drop it so she could get my help with the kids as she struggled to find work. I wasn't going to violate that temporary restraining order for any reason. As I mentioned, when I walked back to the house, there was an officer waiting at a Walgreens just down the block. He stopped me, asked what was going on, and I told him about the fight, showing him the messages. We chatted for about half an hour, and he seemed to think everything was okay. He asked about my plans, and I told him I was going home to get my bag for work and leave for the weekend, so I could file for divorce at the start of the week and be done with it all. He thought that sounded like the best course of action and offered to give me a ride to the house. I declined and suggested he go up and explain the situation while I walked the last bit. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. She apparently lost her mind when they said they were going to let me go. By the time I got there, about 10 minutes later, I asked if I was free to enter, and they could follow me. They told me to hold up, and additional cops were pulling up. I spent the next hour and a half waiting to hear what was going on. Eventually, they came out and asked me to put my hands behind my back. For those wondering, the text message in question said something like, "I'm done with this crap. It's time you suffer the consequences of your actions." Looking back, it was an extremely poor choice of words against a bipolar narcissist. I sounded like a criminal threatening my wife. I should have elaborated on what I meant, which was the fact that we were getting a divorce, she would be forced out of the house, and I was going to fight for full custody of my daughter. I've never written a vaguely worded text since. About 6 months prior to moving away for my promotion in September 2018, my ex-wife's mental state took a turn for the worse. She started experiencing delusions, seeing ghosts, and talking about demons. She claimed to be scared to be at home alone with the kids. My job required me to be away for extended periods, ranging from a week up to several months at a time. This situation could have been eased if she had gotten a job to contribute financially, but she refused, citing her revoked nursing license. I should have been more vocal about it, but I wasn't. I was paid well, and up to that point, to my knowledge, she had been faithful. She was raising the 3 kids at home and used her free time during the day to work on rehab projects for the house we had bought. One day, I returned from a job in the spring of 2018, and her cousin by marriage, let's call him John, was there. She quickly summarized their growing up together and how he had come to help her with something from the hardware store. John seemed all right, but she appeared overly nervous about him, even though he played it cool. This was the first time she introduced me to one of her helpers, by the way. He hung out for about 15 minutes to avoid making it weird, then excused himself and left. I didn't see or hear about him again for several months. He apparently secretly stopped by quite often when she was feeling extra paranoid. To explain the angel/demon paranoia, my ex had given birth to our daughter in late 2016. By spring 2017, she was unhappy with the weight she had gained and was dealing with mild postpartum depression. This led her to revert to her narcotics used to quickly lose weight. I had known about her previous pill addictions, but not the harder stuff until I caught her with it. A significant fight ensued, and she promised to quit and go to therapy. I accepted, and we tried to move on. Throughout 2017, she continuously slipped into using narcotics during a prolonged manic episode. By late 2017, I was ready to leave, but things settled down around Christmas, and we had a relatively stable period through mid-2018. However, her manic episode seemed to flare up again around Christmas. In the summer of 2018, John started popping up a lot in our conversations. He would help with physical labor, working on the house with my ex, always when I was away for jobs. He was never around when I was home, which was strange. Eventually, I caught them together, and the blame was directed at me for being constantly absent. I had emphasized that if she worked even a low-paying job, I could have afforded to be home more. Ironically, John turned out to be unemployed too, so they had all the time in the world to play the happy couple while I worked 80-plus hour weeks on the road, about 40 to 44 weeks a year. I was furious. I filed for divorce for the first time, and she flipped out, begged, and pleaded, claiming it was over and expressing remorse. This whole saga led, in part, to us moving away for the promotion and getting a fresh start in the fall of 2018. By the summer of the next year, 2019, her phone was constantly blowing up with text from someone, saved as Jennifer and Jacob with names changed. She claimed it was her aunt's cousin updating her on her aunt's condition, who was supposedly very ill. This, too, turned out to be a lie. My ex-wife wasn't tech-savvy, and when she changed iPhones, she had me back up her phone on the family computer. Eventually, my suspicions grew, and I used a program to open the backup and dump her text history. To my dismay, Jennifer and Jacob were really just Jacob, and there weren't any talks about her at all. Instead, there was a ton of flirting, questionable pics, and videos flying back and forth. Confronting her about my findings after processing it all for about a week was heartbreaking. Nothing had changed, and, of course, I was the bad guy for breaching her privacy. She filled me in on who he really was, John's adopted brother who lived a few hours away. She claimed that I've tried to hook up with him at some point, but it never went all the way. My new job allowed me to be home every night, and she started seeing she needed a break from the responsibilities of being a full-time stay-at-home mom, usually going to a family member's place hours away. At this point, I didn't know when it would finally be over, but I knew it was coming. The financial situation was dire, as we had overextended ourselves on the new home, banking on the idea that she would find a job after we moved, which never happened. Living paycheck to paycheck on a $100K salary, maxed out credit cards, bankruptcy seemed like the only way out. There was so much drama and arguing that this situation was just another blip on the radar. Mentally defeated, I filed for divorce early in 2020. The divorce was predictably challenging, dealing with a spouse like her. One night, deep in those thoughts, fueled by half a fifth of Crown Royal, I wondered about the other guy's life. I looked him up and found he had a family, 2 kids, and a seemingly perfect life on Facebook. I wondered if his wife knew what had happened or if he got away without a scratch. Jacob's wife looked genuinely sweet and caring on Facebook. Curiosity led me to Jennifer's Instagram. I sent her a message gently explaining what I had discovered several months prior, unsure if she'd ever respond. When she did, it was even more disheartening. She said she had known about my ex and had suspicions but couldn't prove it and wished I had told her sooner. She also claimed to know that my ex and John were dating because we had gotten divorced, which was categorically untrue. Lastly, Jennifer said that Jacob had a history of this sort of thing, always stopping short of hooking up, for reasons unknown, maybe guilt. Jennifer wanted proof, so I gathered up the exported texts, videos, and pics and sent them over to her. I warned Jennifer that the texts would hurt a lot more than the flirty messages, and after reading them, she agreed. I apologized, but at least she knew the truth before investing more time in it. We never spoke again after that. Within a week, Jacob apparently got my number from my ex and started blowing up my phone with texts. He congratulated me, acknowledging that his marriage was over, and blamed me for it. I largely ignored him, except to say that he should have respected what he had and not contributed to destroying my life as well. After that, I blocked him. I wasn't out to destroy his life. My intention was to make his wife aware of the situation and let her handle it as she saw fit. It was a somber victory, but a victory nonetheless. As a legal clarification on transmitting graphic photos and videos to Jennifer, my ex tried to accuse me of sending revenge photos to Jacob's ex. I had my attorney handling my criminal case review this claim, and he shrugged it off. None of the images contained anything that could identify Jacob or my ex, so it didn't hold weight and went nowhere. Bonus. There's a lot more to John's story with my ex that I haven't covered since it's not relevant to the ending of this one. Nice that you blew up his world, but I feel like your wife deserved the brunt of your revenge. I hope she got her comeuppance too. She got hers for sure, but that's for another story. Regarding her kids, I couldn't adopt them, but I definitely would have. She ultimately lost our daughter to me with full custody, and she moved to Las Vegas with her older 2 and the new baby she got stuck with from cheating. There's a whole other story there, though. Until next time. Dear listener, if you have reached this far, please click on the subscribe button. It will be a great help.